Savi, can you hear me? Soyato?
I can hear you.
Sir, we can hear you properly. Sir, please go on. Yep.
Let me start. It's exactly 7 o'clock and we are starting. Maintaining
Yes.
our last 2 episodes. We exactly started 7 and we finished by 8:30. And I'm very pleased, like we are doing our 3rd episode of this, series of webinars on cardiac devices, CIDs. And we have moderator for today's session is Dr. Ravin Chakravarti. Unfortunately, he is busy with some patients. He will be joining soon in next 5-10 minutes. So we will not wait. We'll go with the presentations. We have got two very renowned and excellent speakers. One is Sojato Chakravarti. He has worked with me and he has got fantastic clinical acumen as well as good pair of hands. And second is Sabri Vasan. We all know him. He's one of the stalwarts in the field of pacing, and he takes care of the CID division and also the training of entire Abbott team. So without delay, let me ask Sojato to start his, to go straight with his talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Hello. Yeah. So I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, sir, for that introduction. I think CID devices, discussion about CID devices is something that is, I think, lacking in our discourse, common cardiology discourses. We try to focus more on intervention or hardcore EP. However, there is a lot to discuss and it's a very interesting field. And thanks to you for taking that initiative. I have been asked to talk today on basic timing cycles of single and dual chamber. So I will try to keep it as brief as possible and also try to incorporate as many details so that it's not it is exhaustive. And so okay, so here we go. So basically the objectives of our discussion today is limited to timing cycles of single and dual chamber devices. So as you can see in this slide, I have borrowed from the slides. I haven't made any alterations to them too. So thanks to Abbott for that. So let's start with single chamber devices. So actually, this is a discussion model that I'll follow. So maybe you all, if you have any questions, you can actually start writing on the chat box, and I'll be following them and try to answer as we go along. So we'll try to go along according to how we think devices were developed in chronological as well as logical order. So pacing modes in single chamber. So basically, if you think about it, if you have a single chamber device, that means a device in which a single lead is implanted into the right ventricle. There are two types of modes by which you can actually pace the device. One is called as asynchronous mode, and the other is called as demand mode. So you can have asynchronous mode of pacing into the right atrium. You can have asynchronous mode of pacing in the right ventricle, and demand modes in the two chambers as well. So what exactly is the difference in terminology? What is the difference between asynchronous and demand pacing? So basically, asynchronous pacing is something that it paces all the time at the rate that you have set up. Demand pacing, on the other hand, it actually is a combination of pacing with sensing. So it tries to sense whether there are intrinsic cardiac events going on in the respective chambers. And if there are sensed events, then your pacing intervals are changed. If there are no sensed events, the pacing pulses are delivered according to the intervals that we have set for them. So, for example, this ECG. So if you can see here, in this ECG, you can see the first two complexes, the complexes to the left. The first two complexes are typical ventricular pace complexes that I think most of us are familiar with on ECGs. The third complex is a different complex compared to the previous one. It looks like the intrinsic PQRST that we see in our daily practice. There is also a deflection at the end. We'll miss that. We'll skip that. The fourth is again a typical pace complex. So what is there in this ECG that is different? The different is the third complex, which is an intrinsic complex. Because of this intrinsic QRS, the pacemaker actually detects this QRS and stops pacing for a certain period of time. There is no intrinsic activity detected again, and therefore the next pacing spike occurs. So this is what is meant by sensing and inhibition due to detection of intrinsic events. So single chamber pacemakers can be either a single chamber pacing into the right ventricle, or it can be pacing into the in the right atrium, mostly positioned at the right atrial appendage. So what are the basic rate intervals? So we'll start from the basic rates and go upwards from there. So there is something called as a base rate interval, as simple as that. So basically, if you have put in a pacemaker in your right ventricle and you want the pacemaker to be paced at say 60 per minute, 60 per minute. So that 60 beats per minute is your basic rate interval. The 60 corresponds to a basic rate interval of 1000 milliseconds, which means that one ventricular pacing spike will be followed by another ventricular pacing spike at an interval of 1000 milliseconds, which basically over 1 minute corresponds to 60 beats. So this is called as basic rate interval. If there is an intrinsic QRS, intrinsic event happening in between, like in the third QRS here, this third QRS, this intrinsic QRS will reset the basic rate interval, and a new basic rate interval will start from this sensed QRS. So this is what is basic rate interval. So it is the interval corresponding to the programmed base rate. Mostly it is 60, sometimes we also keep it at 70, rarely, sometimes we also keep it at 50. So this is the base rate or base rate interval. This is the lowest rate at which the pacemaker will pace, and it starts after every paced or sensed event. So every word is important here. So this base rate interval is triggered by either a paced event or it is triggered by a sensed event, whichever comes earlier in the timing cycles. And it ends with the next paced or sensed event. So that is another important thing. So in a VVI pacemaker, you can either have purely ventricular pacing, that is VP, 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 and so on, or you can have pacing interrupted by sensing. So VS, VP, VS, VP, or any other combination of VS or VP that can occur. In an AAI pacemaker, that is an atrial pacemaker, you can similarly have AP-AP or ASAP sequences. So again, so VVI timing. So if there is a ventricular pace, ventricular base beating, so the time from one ventricular pace to the other ventricular pace is the basic rate interval. If there is a sensed event like the third one, so the base rate is interrupted. So you can actually, some pacemakers, actually if you interrogate them, they give this sort of ladder diagrams, which actually show this basic rate interval. So the third one, you can see that the basic rate interval is interrupted in between by a sensed event and a new base rate interval, this inclined slope. A new inclined slope starts, which indicates the new base rate interval. So, so sensing actually, logically speaking, or if you see logically thinking, sensing is actually good. It actually helps us detect intrinsic QRS complexes and allows intrinsic heartbeats to occur. So if you have a VVI pacemaker and if there is a sensing function involved, you can actually potentiate intrinsic sensing and avoid 100% ventricular pacing. We all know that the lesser ventricular pacing it is, so it is good. So pacing, sensing is definitely good. But what is the problem if there is uninterrupted or unwanted sensing in these devices? So if you see here, this is a very interesting diagram. So the top line shows you the far field, the ECG you can see here. The ECG shows a P, a QRS, and a T. A P, a QRS, and a T, so on and so forth. So you can see here that in the ladder diagram, the channel in between, you can see that there is ventricular pacing, which is marked by the onset of the QRS wave on the ladder diagram. However, some time after this, so some 316 milliseconds after this ventricular pacing, the ventricle is actually sensing something which is shown as ventricular sense, which is marked as VS. So what exactly is the ventricle sensing here? So you can see that there is inappropriate sensing going on in between throughout. So what exactly is happening here? So what exactly is the ventricle sensing here? So you can see the tick marks and the wrong. So the cross marks indicate erroneous sensing going on. So this is basically T wave, which is very prominent and which is being sensed as a intrinsic QRS. So if your programming is not right, you can actually end up sensing other things which are going on, like the repolarization T wave shown here. So what can this do? This can actually lead to inhibition of pacing. So suppose you have this QRS and a prominent ventricular sense. So you can see here ventricular sensing is corresponding with a T wave. So this is sensed by the pacemaker as an intrinsic event, and it can actually inhibit pacing till the next base rate interval is over and the next VP occurs. So basically the VP to VP interval is prolonged and the pacemaker is actually now pacing at somewhere around 45 beats per minute, although it was supposed to pace at the lowest rate of 60 beats per minute. So in a person who is pacing dependent, it can actually lead to bradycardia and erroneously low ventricular pacing rates. So your sensing is, although it is good, it has to be accurate. It has to be accurate. It should not pick up events other than intrinsic QRS complex in the right ventricle. So how do we do that? This led to the concept of development of refractory periods. So this is a period. So the pacemaker decides that, okay, after a ventricular paced event or any event for a paced event for that matter, it will trigger a refractory period where any of these events will not be detected for a pre-specified interval. So this pre-specified interval, we now have a new period. This is called as the refractory period. As the name suggests, the pacemaker won't respond to sensing by changing the pacing intervals by anything which happens within this refractory period. So suppose this is a ventricular pace. So this is a ventricular pacing spike followed by a ventricular depolarization. A refractory period starts right after the ventricular pacing spike is given, and it encompasses the whole of the repolarization phase, because of which this T wave, it falls into the refractory period. It is not sensed, and therefore it does not lead to resetting of our base rate. So to prevent sensing, this refractory period is built in the pacemaker device. So refractory period, you have to understand that refractory period can be initiated not only by a paced event, it can also be initiated by a sensed event. So suppose this is the ventricular pace complex to your left, it initiates a base rate interval. Again, a ventricular paced event occurs at the end. If there is a VPC, suppose for discussion's sake, let's say this third complex is a ventricular ectopic which occurs at, and it falls into the into the refractory period. So this will now not lead to resetting of the ventricular base rate. It will be marked. It will be sensed by the pacemaker. It will be given an annotation of VR, which means ventricular event in the refractory period, but it will not reset your base rate interval. So the same patient with programming of a ventricular refractory period, you now have something being sensed, but that sensing is not leading to resetting the rates because it is falling into the refractory period. So that is the concept of your refractory period. So now we have with constant evolution. So something else came up, which is called as a blanking period. So as you can see in the previous slide, again go back to the previous slide. So if something falls in the refractory period, you can see that it is not resetting your base rate intervals, but it is being recognized. It is definitely being stored by the pacemaker, and it is being stored as a VR or an AR event as required. It is being stored. So blanking periods. So what exactly are blanking periods? So this is a new period. So blanking periods are programmed into the first few milliseconds of a refractory period generally. These are periods where the pacemaker can't sense and respond to an intrinsic event. So the pacemaker is actually blind to any activity and no events can be sensed. It does not sense any events and it does not also store any events which is there in the blanking period. So this is done so that pacing stimulus, sometimes if you have a very powerful pacing stimulus given into the myocardium, it can actually give rise to a prominent after potential, which means a prominent depolarization wave which persists even after it has to stop. So this blanking period actually takes care of that. Sorry. Hello. Can you hear me?
Carry on, carry on. I think there was some article.
Okay. So this is a blanking period which actually takes care of your after potentials or any events occurring at the beginning of your refractory period, which is not stored by the pacemaker, not sensed, basically is ignored by the pacemaker. So other than these two periods, obviously, so you can understand, so there is a new period which is left, which comes after the refractory period to the next event. So this new period is called as an alert period. So if suppose from your ventricular pacing spike, these star marked greenish areas are your ventricular refractory period, the remaining period from till your next ventricular spike comes is called as an alert period. Anything in this period will actually be picked up and will be used to reset the functioning of the pacemaker. So this is called as an alert period. The pacemaker has eyes ready for this period and can respond to whatever events that occurs into this period. So this is called as an alert period. So what are the alert periods in VVI mode? So basically these greenish intervals that have been marked, these all are alert periods. So these alert periods, as you can see, are variable. They depend on actually the base rate, and they has been set at. But these alert periods are basically, you can actually minus the refractory period from the base rate, and you get an idea of the alert period. So anything which happens within the alert period resets your base mode. So anything which happens within this period will reset the intrinsic activity. So again, so what is modern VVI timing? So suppose you have a ventricular paced event. This initiates a blanking period, which is marked by the black box. Nothing is sensed here. Then there is a refractory period, which is marked by the pink box. This refractory period ends at this point. After this starts the alert period. Anything in this alert period will be sensed. So because this is a single chamber pacemaker, it does not detect the P wave here, but it goes on, and at the end of this base rate interval gives another ventricular pacing spike. Again, the same happens here. Same happens for the next beat. Two refractory periods, one blanking, one refractory are set up. So again, so in the third beat, if you see ventricular pacing comes, and this is interrupted by a VPC, an ectopic beat. So this is sensed by the ectopic beat. This is marked by the ventricular, by the pacemaker as a VS, or a ventricular sensed event. This starts a new blanking period and a new refractory period, a new black and red period. This, at the end of this refractory period, again you have an alert period. At the end of that base rate interval, again you have VP. So this goes on and off, and this is how VVI pacing works. So what is the difference from VOO mode? The problem with the VOO mode is that the VOO mode does not detect any intrinsic activity. So if you see the fourth complex, the fourth complex is an intrinsic activity. So the fourth complex has not been, if the pacemaker is in a VO mode, it won't sense this pacing activity and will give rise to a spike at the end of the base rate interval, which is marked by this arrow. You can show my cursor here. However, if it is a synchronous mode, it will be sensed and you can actually withhold pacing till the next base rate interval occurs. So in a VO mode, you can actually have pacing going on in spite of whatever intrinsic event is happening. This can actually be dangerous because you can actually give a pacing spike right at the peak of the T wave. This can give rise to R on T phenomenon, and this can give rise to arrhythmias. So in base ventricular VVI pacing, what will happen is that intrinsic QRSs will be detected, and your won't have R on T or refractory period or arrhythmic events going on. So the advantage of VVI mode is it provides ventricular pacing support, is relatively easy to implant and evaluate, and main advantage in our settings is relatively low cost. But this comes at the cost of loss of atrioventricular synchrony. You are not sensing whatever is going on in the atrium, and you can't actually track the atrial waves. So there is loss of atrial synchrony. So atrium is contracting in its own fashion, and ventricle is contracting according to whatever base rate you have set. This can actually lead to, over a period of time, reduced stroke volume, reduced cardiac output. Dysynchrony can lead to contraction against closed valves. You can actually see tall JVP Cannon waves if you are careful enough. Single chamber pacing leads to retrograde conduction and increases chances of pacemaker mediated tachycardias, atrial fibrillation, and heart failure. Pacemaker syndrome, that is shortness of breath because of this loss of AV synchrony, and consequently quality of life problems. So basically, this is something that we have to understand. That's why dual chamber pacemakers are developed. There is a widespread, unfortunately, there is a widespread concept that ventricular single chamber pacemakers are minimum what is required, and dual chamber pacemakers are actually a luxury. This is a very erroneous thinking. This is not true. And basically, we should always try to pace in dual chamber pacemakers whenever and wherever possible. Why, we'll come to know. So let's see here. So what does this ECG show? This ECG shows pacing spikes with nice narrow QRS complexes. How is this happening? So what pacing is going on here? Any ideas? So So, so what is happening here is that there is an atrial pacing spike followed by a QRS complex. So this is actually atrial pacing, and after the atrial pacing, there is intrinsic conduction and intrinsic QRS. So ideally, if there is a intrinsic conduction and narrow QRS, that is the ideal state. However, the closest you can get to it is by doing dual chamber or DDD pacing. This leads to lesser AF, better quality of life, and lesser mortality. So it is surprising that in India, like I was saying, pacing is, although it is indicated guideline-wise only in chronic. Closest that you can get, I was saying, condition. However, in India, like I was saying, it is not supposed to be put in any other than DDD pacing, mostly because of cost issues. So let's have a look into how DDD dual chamber pacemaker timing cycles operate, how they give the advantage. What exactly is the DDD stands for? What do the DDD stand for? So let's start basic timing cycles. So suppose there is a wave. Look at the bottom. If there is a QP wave, now you have an atrial lead. This senses this sensed event after a programmed atrioventricular delay. A ventricular sensed event is so in a dual chamber mode, first
Sorry to intervene, sir.
Both the ventricles. Second,
Sir,
sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we are losing your voice in between, sir. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's breaking.
Oh,
Okay, you can carry on, please.
hello.
If you he has joined and
Dilip, if they switch off your video now, the voice will become clearer.
if
If
you
the
also
presenter can switch off
Now
the
you have an
video,
atrial lead. This
the voice will
senses
become clearer.
this sense event after
can hear
my
me,
video. I think. Okay.
you switch off your video.
Okay, I'll stop. Right now you have an atrial programmed atrioventricular chamber mode. First, okay, I'll start ventricular and AV synchrony is movement. Second,
Just check.
can you hear?
Swajato,
My view, I think that's it.
Swajato,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes, I've switched off the video. Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, I can.
Swajato, what I suggest when you show a ECG, there are about 41 participants, so you can give a pause and ask some question. Let the participant answer these ECGs through chat box, and then we can have an interactive session through the chat box. That would be much more interesting, rather than
Yeah, so at the start of, so actually at the start, like I mentioned at the very start of my talk, you can put in your queries in the chat box, and I'll be looking at them and sharing.
Still letting you give some time.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very clearly. What I suggest
Okay,
you
good
show an
evening.
ECG.
Yeah.
Yeah, good evening. Show an ECG and ask the participant to answer that through chat box. You repeat it again, Once you say that, they may not be able to register it. Okay, go ahead. I'm switching off my audio.
I'll go ahead with my, I have, so as I have prepared, so there are some ECGs at the end. So atrial timing cycles. So basically in dual chambers, you have atrial timing cycles and you have ventricular timing cycles. So what are the atrial timing cycles? Basic atrial timing cycles. Pacing, it means that the timing interval from the atrial pacing pulse to your ventricular event. You can program this according to your whatever you want. What is a sensed AV delay? Sensed AV delay basically means the pacemaker, the atrial lead picks up a sensed P wave, an intrinsic P wave, and triggers an AV delay at the end of which the ventricular lead delivers a spike. Along with this, we now have two refractory periods. So one of these is called as a post-ventricular atrial refractory period and a post-ventricular atrial blanking. That means after every ventricular pacing which occurs, a refractory period and a blanking period are triggered after the ventricular pacing occurs. So these are the four basic periods that you have to remember. Also remember that there is something called as total atrial refractory period. So total atrial refractory period is basically the sum of your sensed AV delay along with your post-ventricular atrial refractory period. So it's called total atrial refractory period because it basically means the total period in which any any event in the atrial channel will not be picked up and will be marked as refractory. Anything other than that falls in the atrial alert period and also in the ventricular alert period. So atrial timing cycle review. So here you have a sensed AV delay. So if you can see the pink marker starts from the onset of the P wave and ends into the Q wave. So this is a sensed atrioventricular delay. Suppose this sensed atrioventricular delay is 220 milliseconds. So basically it will mean that after the onset of the P wave at the end of 220 milliseconds, the ventricle will give us will give a spike of pacing, which will then capture the ventricular myocardium. So this is what is sensed AV delay. There is also something called as a paced AV delay. So what is the paced AV delay? Suppose the atrium does not find any intrinsic activity and gives a pacing spike. So now the third complex, if you notice, after the atrial spike is given, an atrial paced AV delay is triggered. Say this is, for example, 240 milliseconds. So at the end of 240 milliseconds, your ventricular pacing spike will be given unless a ventricular intrinsic event is detected. So you can see that because an intrinsic event is detected in the third, there is only atrial pacing followed by ventricular intrinsic ventricular sensed wave. And in the fourth, there is an atrial pacing followed by a ventricular pacing event. So this is what is sensed AV delay and paced AV delay. Basically, delays after any sensed or paced AV delay, paced atrial events. These can actually be programmed. So PVAP. So what exactly is a PVAP? So all these green arrows. So you see, as soon as the AV delay ends, as soon as your AV delay ends, the post-ventricular atrial refractory period starts. And anything which falls outside that refractory period is actually the alert period where the pacemaker senses and responds. So these are the basic atrial cycles. So what are the ventricular timing cycles? Ventricular blanking. So after the ventricular pacing spike is given or a ventricular sensed event is detected, a ventricular blanking period starts when nothing is detected and nothing is recorded. After that, there is a refractory period where things are detected, although these are not used for resetting the ventricular timing cycle intervals. So you have a blanking period and you have a refractory period. The rest of it is basically the ventricular alert period. So there are basically four states of DDD pacing. So there are four possible combinations. You have either pure pacing, atrial pacing, ventricular pacing. You have atrial sensing, ventricular pacing. You have atrial sensing, ventricular sensing, and atrial pacing, ventricular sensing. So these are the four combinations that the patient that are possible with DDD. Although generally it's only one or at the most two modes which are present in a particular patient. All four are generally not present. It's generally one or two modes. So there are four states of pacing. These are shown in this cartoon. So first complex, you have an atrial pace followed by a ventricular pace. You can see the two pacing spikes. One is an atrial pacing spike. One is a ventricular pacing spike. Second is an atrial pacing spike followed by an intrinsic QRS, so APVS. Third is an atrial sense followed by ventricular pacing, ASense VP. And the four is both are atrial sensed and ventricular sensed, ASVS. So these are the four possible combinations that occur. Although, as I said, all four are not present in the same patient at the same time. So these are the four events. So again, a representation of that. So what is atrial pacing and ventricular sensing? The atrium gives an electrical current here, and after the propagation of that, there is an intrinsic QRS and there is an VS event. So DDD timing. So suppose there is an atrial paced event. So an atrial paced event, after it starts after an atrial pacing spike is given, one thing that you have to remember is that a refractory period is also started in the ventricular chamber. So for a few milliseconds, say 40 or 50 milliseconds, the ventricular chamber is also blanked out for any events occurring. So this is to prevent crosstalk. I'll come to crosstalk later. So the atrial chamber, again, an atrial refractory period is initiated. After the end of the atrial AV interval, if a ventricular sensed event is detected, a ventricular sensed event leads to inhibition of ventricular pacing, and it leads to starting off the two refractory periods that I was talking about. Next comes, suppose your atrial. So this is basically how your APVS occurs. So if there is atrial pacing and ventricular inhibition, this goes on and goes forth. So this is very basically functional AAI pacing which is occurring in a DDD chamber. So next is dual chamber pacing. So next, suppose if we have both ventricles being paced, so you have an AP and a VP. So look at the second line, the marker channel. You have AP, VP going on at pre-specified intervals. So the interval between the AP and VP is somewhere 170 milliseconds, which is marked in this ladder diagram. And after that ventricular pacing, there is a refractory period of which corresponds to a total refractory period of 922 milliseconds. So you can actually estimate the ventricular refractory periods from these values. So what happens in AP and VP? Simply put, an atrial pacing spike occurs, 2 refractory periods are initiated in the atrial chamber, and then a ventricular pacing spike occurs, which leads to initiation of 2 different refractory periods in the atrial chamber as well as in the ventricular chamber. The black one is the blanking and the red one is the refractory period. So in the atrial chamber, you have 2 different blanking and refractory periods before the ventricular event and after. And in the ventricular chamber, you have 1 blanking period and refractory period which occur after the ventricular paced event. So this is how dual chamber APVP goes on. So what is ASVP? ASVP is something that is always preferable and very commonly seen. So the atrium senses an intrinsic QRS, and at the end of an atrioventricular interval, which is pre-specified by the programmer, the ventricle gives a spike and the ventricle is captured by this. So basically you are tracking the atrium. So this is called a tracking mode. So you have an atrial sensed event, and after an atrioventricular interval, the ventricle searches if there is no intrinsic ventricular event, a ventricular pacing spike is given and your ventricular timing cycle starts. So after the ventricular pacing spike is given, there is a ventricular blanking period and a ventricular refractory period, and there is a corresponding atrial blanking and atrial refractory period in the atrial channel as well. So this is called as post-ventricular atrial blanking and the post-ventricular atrial refractory period. So these 2 refractory periods are set off in the 2 chambers after initiation of a ventricular event, either sensed or paced. So this is something that you have to conceptually remember all the time. So a ventricular event gives rise to 2 different sets of refractory periods in the 2 chambers. So, and lastly, you have pure sensing. So if there is intrinsic activity going on at short AV intervals, the atrial sensed event is picked up and a ventricular sensed event is picked up. Again, the ventricular sensed event gives rise to 2 sets of blanking and refractory periods in the 2 respective chambers. So
we have another presentation. So if you can do
just last 2-3 slides about crosstalk. So I just wanted to end by crosstalk before that will be the end of my slide. So suppose you have if you look at the second complex, an AP, suppose there is an atrial pacing spike. This atrial pacing spike can, the atrial pacing spike can actually sometimes be detected by the ventricular chamber. So if that happens, the atrial pacing spike, if it is detected by ventricular chamber, it can actually lead to inhibition of ventricular pacing. So you see here, there is an atrial pacing spike given and it has been simultaneously detected by ventricular chamber and has been marked as ventricular sensed. And because the chamber sees it as an intrinsic event, it leads to inhibition of pacing. So if your atrial pacing spike is very powerful and your programming is not adequate, it can actually be sensed by ventricle. This is called as crosstalk, and this is a very dangerous phenomenon because you can see that in a dependent patient, it can lead to loss of pacing. So to prevent this, you have to place a blanking period inside the ventricle just after an atrial paced event. So this is called as ventricular blanking period or post-atrial ventricular blanking. This is very important that this is also programmed so that you can prevent crosstalk. If you don't do this, if you don't prevent a ventricular blanking period, it can actually lead to loss of pacing. There is something called a safety window which comes after atrial blanking, which provides safety and so that it does not inhibit ventricular pacing for too long in the ventricular blanking period. I think we can discuss this later. So this was the objective of my discussion, single and dual chamber pacing. again, just to end, dual chamber pacemaker mimics your God's perfect timing, and that's why we should advise dual chamber pacemakers to everybody. So, uh, uh, can I have just 2 minutes? Can we discuss two cases, or should we go over to the next presentation?
Go for the next presentation, and then we'll discuss in the last.
What is the time? What is the time schedule?
Sir, we have another presentation for 25 minutes.
Dilip, what is the time schedule?
We have another 45 minutes left, sir.
45 minutes. So Sabri is going to talk for how long?
25-30 minutes, sir.
20-30 minutes. So we got anyway. Shojata, can you finish quickly?
Yeah.
These are your two cases.
Okay, so I'll try to go quickly. Can you see this? Can you see this?
Yeah, clear, very clear. Go ahead.
So this is the QRS, the ECG tracing below. So this tracing, can anybody tell me what exactly is going on? What type of pacing mode is going on here? So I'm opening my chat box. Just 2 minutes. I'll wait. We can have suggestions.
Just 1 minute. Can someone quick suggestion so that
Manish has given.
So you can see P waves, you can see QRS waves, you can see pacing spikes. So
Yes.
what exactly is the sequence of events going on, and what is okay? Somebody has said it's a VDD going on. Okay, that is one. Somebody else is saying ASVP. Okay. Anybody else?
okay, start.
Okay, so let's go back and I'll discuss. So if you see here, so how do you interpret what type of pacing pacing mode is going on here? You can see one spike. You can see only one spike which is capturing throughout this timing cycle. So you have basically two. It's either an asynchronous type of pacing, or there is tracking of the P waves. Which P waves because of VDD or DD pacing. But how do you interpret what exactly is going on here? So if you see, so here you have to see that all the P waves, if you can see here clearly, all the P waves present here are followed by a QRS complex. So on the face of it, it might look like it is A sense V pace which is going on. Which means that after this P wave is sensed, after a pre-specified timing interval, ventricular spike is given. However, what is happening here is, if you can see here, that there is a variation in the PV.
Your ECG.
You are not. Yeah, ECG is not visible, sir. There's another screen which has come up.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no.
You can see this?
Yes.
Okay. So if you can see here, so there is a P followed by a pacing QRS. So apparently this looks like this is either some sort of VDD or DDD pacing going on, some sort of A sense V pace going on. But if you look carefully, if you look very carefully, look at the intervals between the start of the atrial event and the start of the ventricular pacing spike. So note the variation in the PV interval. Look at this PV interval. So if you see that the PV interval here is somewhere like in the range of 3 small squares. Look at the next one. The PV interval has changed here. So it's much more than what it was previously. Look at the last one. It has again shortened. So you see that the PV intervals are actually varying. So they are varying from one QRS to the other. So basically what is going on here is that the P waves are actually not being tracked here. So they are not being tracked here. So apparently it might look like a DDD or a VDD pacemaker, but basically this is actually a single chamber pacemaker, and it is not tracking, and there is actually VV interval is stable. So you can see that the VV intervals are all stable. So they are all at the base rate, and hence there is atrioventricular dissociation, and the answer is single chamber pacemaking. Okay. So the second one, this is a pacemaker, this is a DDDR pacemaker. So try to take in all the information. It has been programmed at a base rate of 60, upper tracking rate of 140, a pace AV delay of 220 milliseconds. And now you are called to evaluate this rhythm strip. So you see that there are two pacing artifacts seen here in the fourth complex, which has been circled, two pacing articles. But in other cycles, there are no pacing artifacts. So what is happening here? So these two pacing artifacts, which are occurring everywhere in between, say the second, the fourth, the sixth, and so on and so forth. What exactly is going on here? So how do you interpret this ECG? I will not change this window because I think when I change to chat box, you won't be able to see the ECG. Any suggestions? Okay.
You go to the ECG because I think you're switching back to your original presentation. Go to the ECG. Yeah, there you are.
Can you see now? Okay.
Yes.
So what exactly is happening between the two pacing spikes? Is this normal function going on, or is there something abnormal in this ECG which is being detected? So how do you interpret whether it is normal or abnormal function which is going on here? So if somebody can see the chat box and tell me what are the answers coming, then I'll not change.
Right. I'll tell you the answers. Answers are
Sir.
Anandamohan Moitra, no ECG visible. Manish call under sensing, one possibility, under sensing.
Okay, one is under sensing.
So far, is only one.
Anything else?
No, others are not very relevant to this.
Okay, so Mike, the question here is, during the cycles when the two artifacts are seen, the intervening QRS occurs in which portion of our device timing cycles? So we are talking about timing cycles today. So this QRS which is occurring, this QRS, in which portion of the timing cycle is this QRS falling? Manish, because Manish is saying that it's under sensing, I will just say that, okay, he is right, there is under sensing. Let's take it at that. So if there is under sensing going on, which timing cycle is this QRS falling into?
You haven't got any answer for that.
Okay.
Blanking period. There's one answer has come, blanking period.
Okay. So this is, I think, I will give it to him.
Blanking period, then alert period, then atrial channel.
Alert period and atrial channel. Okay. So basically, how do we? Okay, so I think we have got some correct answers in between. So I'll try to explain what is happening here. So if you see the intrinsic QRS and the QRS following the pacing spike, it's the same. It's virtually the same. The QRS and TR virtually the same here. So it's correct that there is some sort of undersensing going on. This because since this QRS been sensed, then two pacing spikes, at least the two pacing spikes would not have come up. Now let's go to our timing cycles. So if you can see here that 60 beats per minute is our lower rate which has been set, which basically means 60 beats corresponds to 1000 milliseconds. So if we count from the third QRS, suppose we take the third QRS and we count 1000 milliseconds from the third QRS. If we count 1000 milliseconds, it actually corresponds to the second pacing artifact that we see here. Can you see my cursor? It will be easier to understand. So basically, this is the third QR, the QRS which I am marking. After 1000 milliseconds, this pacing spike occurs. So the ventricular pacing spike occurs at the base rate which has been set by us, which basically means that the QRS in between has not been sensed by the ventricular chamber. So this is definitely QRS which has been undersensed. So this is undersensing going on here. So that is very right and that is very good observation. So it also means that this second spike is the ventricular spike, which means that the first spike has to be the atrial spike. So there is an atrial spike here. So we can't see an atrial P wave after following the spike. So what is happening here? So there are two things which are happening. Either there is a P wave which is buried inside the QRS complex, or there is no P wave. So we can't actually be sure here. But whatever it is happening, we can actually be sure that after that atrial pacing spike has been given, so this QRS is coming somewhere in the refractory, in the blanking period or refractory period following the atrial spike. So given the four options here, we have a ventricular blanking period, we have crosstalk sensing window, we have an alert period and post-ventricular atrial blanking period. So basically it can't be an alert period because if it has been sensed in the alert period, there would have been something, the alert period comes basically after the ventricular pacing spike. So it can't be the alert period. It is being detected, this QRS is actually falling into the into the post atrial ventricular blanking period, the option 1, which is given here. So basically, after the atrial spike is given, the QRS is falling into the post atrial ventricular blanking period, and after the set atrioventricular interval. So if you see after the from the AP to the VP spike, it is actually 220 milliseconds. So this is not being sensed, and actually the ventricular spike comes after the preset interval of 220. This ventricular spike actually falls in the refractory period of your intrinsic QRS and luckily does not capture the myocardium. If suppose it had been following in the relative refractory period and had captured the myocardium, you could have had an R-on-T phenomenon and it could have led to ventricular tachycardia. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I hope we clarified a little things, and we can go ahead to the next presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it looks it's a presentation is good presentation, but I'm sure that many the part of the discussion, many people may not be able to appreciate unless you are a true specialist. But in general, yes, primary aspect of the talk, like atrial pacing, atrial setting, ventricular pacing, very quickly covered. We have any discussion or what is the plan now? Dilip,
Yes, sir.
what is the plan? Should we move to the next speaker?
Yeah, we will move on to the
Should we move to the next speaker or yeah? And take all the
Do I have to
discussion
stop sharing or?
Sabri, I think you can go ahead, and then finally we will have comments from Dr. Ravin, and we'll take questions.
Right, Sabri, you start your presentation. So just to stay online. After the presentation of Sabri, then we'll come back to you and have a discussion amongst all of us. Thank you. Sabri, start your talk.
Thanks a lot, sir. And it's a privilege to be part of this elite group of Professor Dr. Rabin, Dr. Dilip Kumar, and Dr. Saujatya. And thank you very much for allowing us to be part of this program. So, as I have been asked to speak on special functions and algorithms, I'll be speaking on 4 algorithms. Though I'll be speaking on one of the algorithms, I will also touch upon what all the competition also offers at the same time in these type of situations. So when the pacemaker started in 1958, so these were the people who were masterminding this invention of pacemakers. And sorry, the first pacemaker implanted is actually looks like a kiwi boot polish, but this actually played an important role in the making of this pacemaker. This pacemaker was actually made from that mold of a kiwi boot polish. And this was implanted in 1958. And this lasted for some time. It lasted for around 1 week. And when after this was implanted, this was the ECG after 7 days. This is actually a pacing ECG. And this is a single chamber pacemaker, and it was being paced. So all of you can try out what is going on in this particular ECG. Though I have given you options, you can look at the options also and give me an answer in the chat box. Is my voice clear? Are you able to see my screen?
Clear, very much clear.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. So Manish Kaul is giving non-tracking, but I don't know, that is not one of the options in this. There are 4 options. You can, yeah. So this was the first pacemaker. After 7 days, it was implanted. They had an ECG like this. And you can see all those arrows. Those are the timings where the pacing pulse was delivered. So I have an answer for CHB. Anything else? I'm telling you that arrow marks the pacing pulse. Over sensing,
So there's no
then the pacing pulse will not happen. Sir, you were saying something, sir?
Yes, loss of capture.
No, the
Great, sir.
pacing,
I
the
think
pacing spike is going in its own way. ECG is going in its own way. There is complete, there is no kind of a synchrony between the pacing spike and the complex.
exactly, sir. You're right, sir. So clearly, as people have started answering it as loss of capture, this was happening within a week, and we have developed a new device which was able to pace the heart. And but now we find that this particular pacemaker, though it is pacing, there is loss of capture. The loss of capture basically means the pulse whichever is given is not able to depolarize the cardiac myocardium. So basically it is the programmed energy which is being given by the pacemaker, it is less than the threshold or the stimulation threshold. So this is a problem which can be happening because the threshold sometimes, because of various other reasons, can climb up. So you might have programmed it at 1.2 and it might, the threshold, that is I'm talking about threshold 1.2, and you might have programmed it at 2.5 fixed output. But over a period of time, because of various reasons, because of the drugs being given, because of maturation, or because of some electrolyte imbalance, sickness, there could be a change in the threshold which may even climb beyond this 2.5 volts. So this is going to be an issue because whatever we have done, we have given a pacemaker and the pacemaker is supposed to capture. And if this not capturing, whatever the algorithms this pacemaker is carrying out of no use because it is not able to capture. Because the basic objective of the pacemaker is to capture and this is not happening. So loss of capture is something which is a problem. So what are the solutions? How we can automatically take care even if there is an increase in the auto capture? That is the thresholds climb up, how there can be a solution. So the first one of the algorithms designed to take care was auto capture from abort. Then also there were other algorithms by other companies like capture control in Biotronic, ventricle capture management in Medtronic, automatic capture in Boston Scientific pacemakers. So almost every single company has an algorithm which is similar to this. This algorithm is supposed to deal with the problem of climbing thresholds. So I'm taking auto capture as a representative algorithm for discussing about this particular solution for the problem of increasing thresholds. So as you can see in this picture, this child will be absolutely not able to go into the pool or fall into the pool. So this is exactly what the pacemakers are trying to do. At no point of time, the pacemaker patient should have a loss of capture. So now the auto capture pacing systems are not only having ventricle, they are also having safety capture for atria as well. So you have this automatic capture management control available in both atria as well as ventricle. So let us understand how this auto capture actually works. So we have a patient and this patient's red line is basically the threshold. This threshold of this individual patient, we see that auto capture has started pacing at 0.875. So auto capture paces at 0.25 volts more than the threshold which has been measured by the device. So if it is 8, it should be around 0.6 should be the threshold, and it is pacing at 0.875. So if you see the safety margin, it is just around 0.25 volts, and this is going to save a lot of energy. But the auto capture's objective is not saving energy. Its objective is to make sure the patient never has a loss of capture. So this goes on, and suddenly you see the threshold starts climbing. At one point of time, the threshold is bigger than the amplitude which is programmed, and there is a loss of capture. And what this algorithm does is, immediately on the loss of capture, gives a backup pulse. So the patient never has a loss of capture because of climbing thresholds. Then it goes for one more time at 0.875, and again there is a loss of capture. So now it starts doing an automatic threshold test. So it is always beat to beat, it is watching. And if there is going to be any problem in the threshold and the threshold rises, it immediately gives a backup pulse and runs a threshold test to find out what is the present running threshold. And now the threshold has almost climbed to 1.25. So this is determined. And after this threshold is subsequently reconfirmed. And after reconfirmation, the device starts pacing at 0.25 above the measured threshold. So it is 1.5. So here the most important thing is we never lost a single beat loss of capture. Even if there was a loss of capture, there was always a backup pulse which was taking care of this patient. So this was the basic idea of this algorithm, so that all the patients at any point of time should never be having any problem of capture. So this is the primary objective, but also it gives secondary benefits to the patient. With a smaller battery, you can do the same thing because your safety margins are going to be less, your longevities can be longer. So that is what the biggest advantage of this algorithm. So it makes sure that 100% the patient is always taken care. There is no loss of capture. At the same time, it is also reducing the battery size. It is also not compromising on the longevity of the devices. One of the algorithms which technology developments which actually gave lot of benefit to the patients and also comfort to the doctors. Now we'll go into one of the typical patient follow-ups. A patient comes to the physician. He says that frequent weak spells characterized by rapid palpitation and near syncopal. And this patient is a dual chamber patient. So what the doctor wants to know is what is the base rate, the intrinsic rate, and what is the P wave height. So the doctor asks the representative to bring the rate down so that to 30, so that they will like to see the native rhythm and measure the P wave amplitude. So the intrinsic is around 32. They brought it to 30, and now you start seeing intrinsic coming in. So we are concentrating on atria. So look at the atrial P wave, and that is what it is denoted by the marker P. So when you see a P, it is an atrial sense. So they start seeing atrial sense now, and they have started measuring the amplitude. And suddenly there is a small run of 2-3 Ps. So they keep measuring the amplitude. And after some more time, the Ps suddenly started becoming more in number, and is almost quite fast. And to the extent, it went into mode switch. So you see there was a patient with having symptoms. They reduced the rate below the base rate to see the intrinsic. When they reduced the rate to 30, they started seeing some frequent P waves. And at one point of time, it almost went to a nearly 300 to 400 rate of the atrium. It went to mode switch. So now what is the reason for this AF started? So you can clearly see it looks like an AF. I don't know whether it is an AF, but could be an AF. So how did this start? So guys, you can use the chat box. You can give the answer. Whether it was a runaway pacemaker dependent AF, or could be because of some accessory pathways, or it was because of noise, this patient went into AF. Are you able to see my presentation? One of them has said you are not able to see that. Show it. Okay. So one of the answer is latency. There is, okay, fine. That is latency in the slide, but not the answer. So no answer still coming. Looks like a very simple ECG. So you saw a patient rate was reduced below the base rate, and you got some P waves, and at the end of the slide, you see quite a lot of P waves, unlimited number of P waves, and yes. So now I can see one of them saying pause-dependent AF. So the ECG is being seen, or you're not able to? Okay. I'll just run back. This is what when they reduce the rate, it came up like this, and it ended like this. Sir, I believe that's what you wanted, sir.
Yes.
So, okay, sir. So you can clearly see as the answers go by, I also go with them. It was a pause-dependent AF. So initially, the patient was getting paced at 60. Now you made the pacemaker to fire at 30, and at 30, it started getting paused, and one of the PACs complicated it. So it was a pause-dependent tachycardia complicated by a PAC. So PACs could be one of the reasons for atrial fibrillation. Not the only reason, but there could be one of the reasons where the patients might be getting atrial fibrillation because of a pause and a PAC. So we are looking at these type of patients. What are the solutions we can give them? Because very well known, the AF can lead to stroke, and stroke kills patients, and unrecognized AF could be also a bigger problem. So all these things can be solved, at least in this type of patients or in this group of patients who have pause-dependent tachycardia, by a new algorithm, which is AF suppression with Abbott, atrial pacing preference with Medtronic, atrial overdrive pacing with Biotronik, and atrial preference pacing with Boston. So Medtronic and Boston have almost similar sounding names, but the objective is all looking at this. That is, when you have a pause, you will get into problem. So I am taking AF suppression as a representative algorithm and how it works. So if you can see the blue dark line, it is actually the sinus rate. So the basic idea of AF suppression is never allow the atria to function on its own. Always try to control it. Make sure that there is no pause and there is no PAC and there is no AF. So if it is going to be a pause-dependent AF, we make sure that it is going to be controlled totally, so you will not be able to allow PACs and pause to come in, and this itself will be able to clear the AF. So only in pause-dependent cases, this will be of use. And this is how it works. So it goes on at a rate, suddenly a PAC comes, immediately it increases the rate and keeps the rate higher. And after some time, like 15 beats, it starts lowering the rate back to base rate. If there is any intrinsic, again it increases the rate. So it is an overdrive pacing all the time, so that you don't allow the pause and you don't allow the patient to get into AF. So this is exactly how it is. So if the current atrial rate is around 50, it paces around 59. That is in the base rate, it paces 10 beats above the sinus rate. And when it goes to the maximum tracking rate or the sensor rate, it goes 5 beats above. So in between, it will be more than 5 to 10 beats. So this is how it is always overdriving, always looking at the sinus. If the sinus goes up, immediately it increases the rate of the pacemaker. So how does it fare up in the studies? There are few studies which have been done, and one of the studies is an ADOPT-A clinical trial, which clearly proved that the AF burden reduction was almost 25% when you have AF suppression on compared to a DDD pacemaker without AF suppression. So this was one of the reasons these type of patients can really benefit out of it. And this is the diagnostics which can clearly show that before AF suppression, how it was. The number of episodes was almost 50, and the time percentage the patient was in AF was almost 50. Then after AF suppression is switched on, it almost comes to a very low number. So this is exactly what you can get your benefit to your patients. Who have pause-dependent AF, they can be used with AF suppression or similar algorithms which can reduce the intensity of AF to a great extent like this. So now we go into the next algorithm. So unnecessary ventricular pacing, useful or harmful. So everybody knows in the first pacemaker, when it was invented, we wanted to pace irrespective of whatever may happen. Then after some time, we found that single chamber is not going to be of use. We went into dual chamber, as doctor said, mimicking the natural sinus rate. When dual chamber came in, then we found that rate responsive pacemakers can be even better. So they will give better adequate support as per the requirement of the activity level of the patient. But later, when we started seeing something came in like this, unnecessary ventricular pacing. So they were necessary pacing, yes, they are really good. But unnecessary pacing, what can they do? So this is one of those gifts we have taken out of the Morse sub-study, which says RV pacing, that to apical pacing, can lead to two types of problems in this particular list of issues. That is, the ill effects of RV pacing can be two things out of this list. So this is open to you all. Kindly go to your chat box, kindly give your answers. So we are having dual chamber pacing, which is the, you can see the fluoro picture also, absolutely normally paced leads, and the apex placement of the RV lead. That is one thing which we are looking at. And if it is going to be like this in the apex, what are the problems? You have to choose two out of this list of problems which are seen in this. I hope everybody are able to see it. Yes, one, Girish has come. Yeah, thank you. And Girish has come up with AF, pacemaker syndrome. Okay, pacemaker syndrome usually happens in single chamber, and you upgrade them to dual chamber, it goes off. So we have one, Dr. Gopal is saying A and B. So atrial fibrillation and reduced left ventricular ejection fraction. So looking at the time, I go for this because this is a correct answer, or this is what the Morse sub-study was talking about. Thank you, sir. Then we go for the answers, which is when you have right ventricular pacing in the apex especially, you will be able to have more chances of getting into AF and heart failure hospitalization. So this is what the Morse sub-study says. And this is basically because you have, when you're pacing, a domino conduction or to cell conduction. This leads to the activation of the left ventricle slightly late. And this creates a functional left bundle branch block. So this is what you are actually creating, a left bundle branch block by pacing the RV at the apex. So this is one of the reasons why the study shows that there is increased rate of AF, and also cumulative ventricular pacing leads to increased risk of heart failure hospitalization as well. So both of the things can be an issue when you have RV pacing, and that too continues for a chronic time. And this Morse study, sub-study clearly talked about it. And there was one more study which echoed the same thing. And this was a David study. And this was for the patients who had no Brady indication. They were ICD patients, but they were put into two groups. One who was getting paced at 70, or the base rate was 70. The other one was given a 40, a low rate of pace. So most of the time, this 40 base rate patients were sensing, whereas the 70 base rate patients were almost getting paced by around 60%. And the end point was death or first hospitalization for CH. So these patients were not heart failure patients. They are not having any Brady indication, but still we have given them pacing. So this is what we are trying to find out, is unnecessary ventricular pacing. So what was the result saying? The same thing what the Morse sub-study said, 60% higher relative probability of hospitalization with worsened HF compared to a lower or 1 or 2% paced patients in the group of VVI 40. So clearly says, unnecessarily, if you pace a patient, you may have a chance of increasing his AF as well as heart failure hospitalization. So now we have to reduce these unnecessary pacing. How to pace? Only when needed. So again, there are a lot of algorithms coming to play which can help the physician to make sure this objective is got. So VIP is from Abbott, MVP from Medtronic, VP suppression from Biotronic, AV search hysteresis from Boston Scientific. So every company has an algorithm which has an objective of reducing unnecessary pacing in the ventricle. So I will take one of the representative algorithm of ventricular intrinsic pacing, or VIP, and this operates up to 110 beats per minute. So every algorithm has a range. It doesn't want to go over to the maximum tracking rate sometimes. So the idea is extend the AV-PV or the sense AV-delay or paced AV-delay to an extent now and then, so that you will be able to get the intrinsic through. So this is exactly how it works. I will go deeply into it. I'll show you animations So that will be more clearer. So if you see, there is a paced AV delay and a sensed AV delay, which is optimized paced AV delay. So whichever you feel is this patient, ideal paced AV delays and sensed AV delays. And now we bring in the ventricle intrinsic preference where you have an extension. So you add 200 milliseconds to it so that you will be able to get an extension now and then for 200 plus 200, let's take paced AV delay, every 1 minute and for one cycle. That is, every 1 minute, it will increase the paced AV delay from 200 plus 200 to 400 milliseconds and look for intrinsic. If there is any intrinsic coming through, well and good, it stays at 400. If there is no intrinsic for one cycle, it comes back and paces at the program 200 milliseconds. The same thing for sensed AV delay, 150 plus 200, 350 it will extend for one cycle after 1 minute. And this is all programmable. So you can put the search interval like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. Like you can put a search interval different way. And search cycles also can be programmed 1, 2, or 3. So we will see examples of how they work and also different type of programming, like not the same what you see here. So here what you see is we are having a programmed interval where it is 225 and you have an offset which can take it to a maximum of 350 milliseconds. And now the search interval has happened. That is, after 1 minute or 30 seconds, whatever you have programmed, it is over here. And after 30 seconds, it increases the AV delay to a maximum of 350 milliseconds. When it increases the AV delay, it finds there is an intrinsic coming through. So when the intrinsic is coming through, wonderful, it keeps on at 350 and the intrinsic is coming now and then. So you have some high grade AV block. There is sometimes the patient is requiring pacing, sometimes the patient doesn't require but only thing in the problem here is you're going to get this sensing at quite a long AV delay or PR interval. So it is 250 or 260 and you can't keep your AV delays programmed at 300 or 350 to allow all the time to get this. So if you take it that if you have programmed it at 350 milliseconds and unnecessarily the AV delays will be prolonged, then the patient is having a block. So to avoid this, whenever he is having a block, we will pace at a programmed AV delay. Whenever he is not having a block, you increase the AV delay to the offset you have, allow the intrinsic to come in. So this is exactly what it was trying to do. So at 250, at the search interval, it increased the AV delay, sinus came in, well and good, it allowed it to continue. Now the same thing, if you're going to have a problem, that is suddenly a block ensues, and you see that this patient starts getting a pacing beat at 350 milliseconds. And now 1, 2, 3 times it is pacing at 350 milliseconds. Then it is coming back to the programmed AV delay. So this will help us, the patient, to have intrinsic coming at any time, allow it. If it doesn't come, after a few cycles, like 3 cycles here, go back to the original programmed AV delays. So this makes sure that you always have a situation where you will be able to pace the patient when required, and the patient is not required to be paced, you just do it. Now I come with, now you have seen this unnecessary pacing. Patients can have increased AV delay to allow intrinsic. Whenever there is a block, they will go back to the programmed AV delay. So which type of patients will be benefited by algorithms like this? So people, you can start. So good, there is quite a lot of answers. So most of them have gone for the answer C, and I agree with them. So intermittent heart block patients. So whenever the intermittent heart block patient is there, these patients are ideal for this. A complete heart block patient, if it is 100% blocked, there is no use for an algorithm like VIP. So we need not even switch on. First degree block, we have to, anyway, this patient probably may not get a pacemaker itself. And 6 sinus patient, If he has an intermittent AV block as well, he will benefit of it. So basically, it is an intermittent heart block patient. They will benefit because of this. So 6-sinus with intermittent heart block, yes, they will be also a candidate for these type of algorithms. So we have seen that this type of patients, we can reduce the unnecessary pacing. So unnecessary pacing, when we take care of that, it also gives atrial pacing with ventricle backup at probably 350 milliseconds, whichever your program, reduces potential ventricular fibrillation, remodeling, as well as incidence of worsening heart failure plus incidence of AF. So all these things can be controlled with an algorithm like this. So now we go to the last algorithm, which is talking about decompensated heart failure. So we are looking into a patient who has already got heart failure, or patient who put a pacemaker, then he gets into heart failure. So it's a pacemaker patient. So if you take the same thing as a CRT-P device, then the patient already has a heart failure. So in these patients, the decompensated HF, that is what we are looking at. So decompensated HF, that slowly it is starting collecting the fluid, and over a period of time, it starts collecting the fluid, and it has been found that 1 out of 4 patients may die even within 1 year. So if the fluid collection is going to be in the lung, there is a chance the patient can just die because of this. So we are having a situation that doctors prescribe, you have been prescribing a lot of medications and other things like activity levels. But whether this patient is following or not, we have no clue. And non-adherence is the leading cause for hospital admissions. So it could be diet, it could be drug, it could be inappropriate drug, or it could be some other reason, and also a reason that you didn't come back to the hospital when you had a problem. So to take care of all these things, when there is going to be a slowly building up heart failure. So here what we are looking at is intrathoracic impedance. So if let us take it is almost 30 days, if the heart failure starts, and at 30th day he will get hospitalized. So at around middle of the time, you will be seeing a lot of thoracic impedance changes. So whenever if you are able to pick up the impedance changes, you will be able to utilize this as a forewarning before the, actually like an astrology, that before 15 days, you can get the information that you are going to get into hospitalization for HF because your fluid collection has started increasing. So this is an algorithm which is going to measure the intrathoracic impedances. And why? Because most of the episodes happen as a re-hospitalization, and that is 80% of that. And this could be also a big problem for the patient because a lot of money is spent on these frequent re-hospitalizations. So in US, they estimate around $40 billion per year is just being used up for this type of re-hospitalization. So now, how to get an early warning so that before the hospitalization need comes, if we get a forewarning and alert, so the patient can come to the doctor, change according to him and medication, lifestyle, food, or any other changes, and make sure he doesn't go into the situation where he has to be hospitalized. So we have 2 algorithms which help in that. One is called as CoreView congestion monitoring from Abbott, and the other one is for Optival in Medtronic in pacemakers. So in pacemakers, these 2 companies are offering, even in pacemakers, these CoreView congestion monitoring and Optival for forewarning of fluid connections. So it basically measures the intrathoracic impedance. And intrathoracic impedance is measured and there is a range fixed. And whenever there is a air, that is lungs are clear, no fluid collection, the impedance is going to be higher. Whenever there is an impedance going to be lower, you can immediately say that there is fluid collection in these patients. So when fluid starts collecting, your impedance starts going down. It's easy for the current to pass through fluid rather than the air. So this is one of the important things with this algorithm uses to understand whether the fluid is getting collected in the lungs or not. And this is how it is done. So you will be having two lines. One will be a impedance line which is made as a reference, and this is the green line. And if you see the red line or the pink line, this is the daily impedance. So over a 14-day period, it has collected a reference impedance and keeps that and compares it with the nominal impedance which is happening every day. And if the daily impedance is high, that means excellent. The body is having a lot of air and not fluid. So whenever the thoracic impedance is more, the lungs are clear. And whenever there is an impedance which is lower, it is always going to be a problem. So this is what you can see in this also. The pink line is lower than the reference line. That means there is fluid collection starting. So this is going to be the one simple thing which is going to be monitored by the device. And this will be monitoring it like this. So if the daily impedance and the reference impedance are compared, if you say they are almost running side by side, so that means the lungs are clear. There is air in the lungs, there is no fluid collection. So CoreView just keeps monitoring. And now a situation happens, the patient starts developing heart failure, fluid starts collecting, and immediately you can see the pink line going down, which is going down means the impedance is low. That means collection of fluid has started. So whenever this thing happens, the pink line starts going down. And when the pink line starts going down, you know that there is a problem. And after a few days, like 8 days, 10 days, whichever your program, it is going to give an alert to the patient, and the patient can come back to the doctor. So that he will not go to the end result of hospitalization, whereas before that itself, you can get an early warning system, because prevention is the key, so that you don't unnecessarily go into hospitalization many times. And this also increases the mortality of these patients. So with these algorithms, patients can be safe. Algorithms have been designed so the technology gives you a lot of leverage, so most information comes to you. You can make an informed decision because of these algorithms, and they also function automatically. So all these things can be happening like this. But never we can say that algorithm is something which will take care of the patient 100% of the time. So there is no situation we can implant and forget. So algorithms are very good. They help you in many ways, but still in these type of corona times where we find the patients are finding it difficult to reach the hospitals also, we should be using the another advantage of algorithm, which is our remote monitoring. So patients can be anywhere in the hospital or in home or in some other place. If the transmitter is nearby, it will immediately initiate a transmission to the Merlin.net site or the remote monitoring site, which is available with all companies, different names, that's it. And it is immediately relayed to the doctor, and the doctor can see clearly what's happening in the patient. And if there is something, a change, he can immediately tell the patient by phone, he can immediately tell it. Or if there is something where the patient has to be called to the office, immediately the patient can also be called to the office. So all algorithms help, plus there is also one overpowering wireless in remote monitoring, which can keep track of this patient and make sure the algorithms are working or any changes to be done. So this is how the newer technologies give peace of mind with algorithms and remote monitoring. So with this, I come to my end of my presentation. So, sir, any questions? Can I have it?
Sir, you have to unmute yourself, Dr. Chakraborty. You are muted.
It's a good presentation, Sabri. Only one question is that, this remote monitoring, I'm confident this is a great tool. Unfortunately, yes, the industry is not very successful in popularizing this tool. What is the reason for this?
Sir, what you say is very right, sir, because one of the reasons mainly is, if you take outside India, they always have one particular setup itself where one or two people are monitoring all the patients. So in India, we don't have the luxury of having one extra person. Doctors are already seeing so many patients. If you see outside India, the number of patients are going to be less. But if you take you or any of our colleagues will be seeing quite a lot of patients. even sometimes 50 patients in a day. So this doesn't allow you to have a clear monitoring. So nowadays, slowly doctors are trying to find more time, and also the patients are also ready to buy a monitor, which makes it slightly costlier than the normal device cost.
No,
and
no, I
with this remote
don't,
monitoring,
I don't think that is the right answer. I think my way of
Okay.
thinking is your patient population did not develop the confidence of having this tool, so that they prefer that a doctor who is physically seeing him, they are much more comfortable because they feel that if a doctor sees the patient with an ECG, although his way of analysis may not be as accurate as the remote monitoring tool, but still the patient has more confidence in the earlier system rather than getting in.
yes, sir, you are very right,
accurate,
because
but somehow the confidence could not be gained by the patient population with this tool. So I think industry has to do some more work on this, which is clearly lacking.
Sure,
They
sir.
really depend on the doctor.
Yes, sir.
You know. So I think you have to
Yes,
you have to participate in, to engage your company, the whole group of industry, to have more patient education, patient talking, rather than, you know, for the people involving in sale, they are just kind of pushing a product rather than making them aware. So there is a fundamental difference between making the patient aware of the utility of the tool rather than pushing them to buy an expensive device. So they think, oh, they're pushing some extra thing. They have more confidence in the doctor who is done the procedure, who has done the procedure, who is there to see the patient. So